Hi, everybody. Welcome. I can see everyone joining us in the chat and in the room. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're here for a webinar titled A Black Founder's Guide to Raising a $2 million Institutional Seed Round. We're super excited to be here having this conversation today. My name is Rachel Shepard. I'm the Director of Global Marketing at Founder Institute and the co-creator of the Female Founder Initiative. The Founder Institute is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. We've launched over 5,000 companies across 200 plus cities and 6 continents. If you're interested in learning more about Founder Institute, we're currently enrolling across all 6 continents, and so you can visit fi.co/enrolling. I'm calling in from the Bay Area today, so please tell us in the chat where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you because we have a global audience and we have an amazing speaker with us today. So today we're here to discuss an incredibly important topic, startup funding from a Black founder's perspective. As a Black founder, Joe Bayen has turned his 1% chance of receiving funding into an infinite opportunity for personal growth, and he's here to discuss that journey with us today. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Joe Bayen, CEO and founder of Grow Credit, who is here to share his guidance and experience on how he raised his $2 million seed round. Hi, Joe. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me, Rachel.
Absolutely. Oh, and we see all sorts of people joining us from Ontario, Los Angeles, Toronto, Philly, Melbourne, Australia, West Orange, New Jersey. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So let me tell you a little bit more about Joe, who's our amazing speaker. So Joe Bayen, CEO and founder of Grow Credit, is here with us. He actually is a multi-time founder. So he previously founded Free App a Day, which grew to 12 million users and generated 18.3 million in total revenue. He is now the CEO and founder of Grow Credit, which Grow Credit's innovative credit building service lowers the barriers of entry for millions of Americans who need to establish and build credit, combining a small dollar loan with a virtual MasterCard. The service manages subscription payments such as Netflix and reports loan balances to credit bureaus. An idea which I love and I'm excited to learn even more about, and I hope that you all are as well. Fun fact, Joe was also a track star, raised in France and secured a scholarship at the University of Miami in track by finishing 5th at the French Nationals in high school. On his track team were several NFL players like Ed Reed and Santana Moss, of which I was really excited to find out because I'm a big NFL fan myself, so it's very cool. So we're excited to have Joe with us here today, and we're just going to jump right into some questions. If you have questions for Joe as we're having our conversation, please put them in the chat. Our team is here gathering them, and we'll get to as many questions as we can on this very important topic. So Joe, let's go ahead and kick it off. In 2010, you bootstrapped a platform called Free App a Day to 18.3 million in total revenue and had 12 million users worldwide. Can you share a bit about your experience bootstrapping your first company?
Yeah, so it was another typical entrepreneur story. You know, I started the company actually as a game studio. So, you know, we started this game studio back in 2007, 2008. And right when we launched our title, our game title that was named Navy Patrol Coastal Defense. It was a title that was promoted by Apple in the App Store. It did actually really well. So we thought that, hey, we won. You know, we were in the top, I think, top 100, and it was doing fantastic. But the problem with Apple promoting you in the App Store is that when they stop, well, your app drops in the ranking as well. So, you know, our apps after 2 weeks started to drop in the rankings. It was becoming harder and harder to essentially become relevant in the App Store. So I had to find, you know, a variety of creative ways to remain relevant. And in December of 2009, a platform that was called Advent Calendar released a system, a program, you know, that you know, had 24 developers who made their apps free for 1 day in the App Store and threw down. And it was from December 1st until Christmas. And I found out about this program, and I asked the developer if I could be part of it. And he told me that all the places were taken, but he could have me as a featured app. So he promoted me in the App Store. Actually, he placed my app on his program. It was on December 2nd, 3rd, I think. And we generated 35,000 installs in a single day. So usually it would have cost me maybe $15,000 to generate that much installs in such a short amount of time. and we it was free, so we didn't generate any revenue. However, I realized that there was another platform that was called Tapjoy, which enables you to actually monetize the free traffic. So I integrated Navy Patrol with Tapjoy. I went back to Advent Calendar and asked them if I could promote my app on Christmas, and they accepted. And to make the story short, we generated 100,000 installs in 3 days and made $15,000 in revenue. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is a business here. So I acquired freeappaday.com for $9.99, on GoDaddy, and then I asked the developer of Advent Calendar if he was going to pursue this venture, and he told me, no, I'm done. It was just for Christmas. So I purchased the site from him for $3,000, and I basically made a press announcement to announce that Advent Calendar would become freeappaday.com starting January 18th. I called a lot of developers to be the first apps, the first game apps for the first 2 weeks. And we launched on January 18th, I believe, and then it became a major success from the onset. We ended up working with with EA, with Zynga, with Groupon. Any companies in the world worked with us at one point or another to promote their apps. So it was a case where we needed to find a way to survive, and I never gave up. I didn't give up, and I ended up pivoting into that business model, which turned into an $18 million in revenue over the past 3.5 years. So it's a case of basically being relentless and just never giving up, essentially.
Making it to that point of product market fit, right? Where you see this extreme amount of growth happen all of a sudden, and the data informs you that something's working here, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Awesome. So you've mentioned the distinct mindset between how you felt when you bootstrapped your first company versus how you felt when you raised funding for Grow Credit. Can you share a little bit about that mindset and the differences between the two experiences?
Yes, when you bootstrapped a company, it's really you and you. There's nobody else. There's no investors. If you basically land on a gold mine and everything is working perfectly, and then you simply have to hire a team that will help you maintain the business to a certain extent. So the hard part is, of course, finding the business, but after that, you don't have to rely. There's no reporting to investors. There's no it's you own your own, essentially. So in terms of when you start raising an institutional round, it's a completely different ball game, in the sense that you cannot do it on your own. For instance, for Grow Credit, we needed help. We needed help from institutional investors to grow our business. So we had to begin the process of developing relationships. What's very important is the fact that when you meet investors, first of all, they will never give you money from the onset. It is a relationship building exercise. In order to receive our funding from Market Capital last year, I've known Market Capital for 3 years. So I've had a relationship with them. They rejected me, a couple of times before as well. So they rejected me about 2-3 times, but I never gave up. I stuck with it. So I established a relationship, built a relationship, demonstrated that, I was the type of entrepreneur that would never give up, and that really helped establish, that relationship, that trust relationship, because investors, they want to know, they understand that only a very few percent of founders, will succeed. And the only way to test, the ability of a founder to really, to understand whether or not they will succeed, is to see whether they will withstand the time, whether they will be able to, remain resilient over multiple years in order to achieve product market fit. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And one of our audience members actually has a very relevant question as well. So MT asks, how important is the initial pitch when you're having conversations with potential funders, right? And then also, how do you access these funders? So you mentioned those relationships and having those for a long time and building those. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And then when you get a chance to have a meeting with them, how important is that initial pitch, and what tips or tricks can you give the audience on how to prepare?
What really matters, validation. I wrote on that article the importance of validation, at every single phases of the fundraising process. And what I mean by validation is the fact that, investors, they're busy. They want to be able to assess your business as quickly as possible. And the easiest way to assess your business is to understand who's on your team. So if you have great advisors, who have experience in your industry, that removes already one question mark. If you have a founder with an experience within the industry that you're working on, that removes another question mark. So, once you send a deck, and you really focus initially, in the first initial pages on showcasing your team of advisors, and where they come from, their background, if they work with at Uber or whatnot, it really helps put an investor in more confident in your ability to execute whatever business plan that you have in mind. So the first step is really when having a deck that is that starts with your team slide should be very impressive. Should have big names, really good, strong advisors, and that will make it a lot easier for an investor to accept meeting with you. So in terms of finding those great advisors, well, it's a hustle game. It's not easy. You have to go on LinkedIn, cold emails, do whatever it takes to meet those people and pitch those people, those advisors at the same time. It is one of the single most important exercise is really being surrounded by amazing advisors and team members to be able to actually grab those meetings with investors. Because the first thing that we'll see is your deck. Does he have a great team? Who's around him? Because at the end of the day, it's a sales job. If you're able to convince one great advisor to join the team, it means you're onto something. And if you're able to convince someone to leave their job, to join your team, someone who has a good job in a good company, you're onto something. It's just all a sales job. So once an investor can see that, hey, if he's able to bring those people on board, he might be able to sell his product to consumers. Because if you cannot, sell whatever you're building to advisors, if you cannot sell it to team members, it means that you won't be able to sell it to the consumer. And most importantly, even on the fundraising front, if you cannot raise money from friends and family, you have a problem, because you will not be able to, if you cannot convince your friends and family to give you even $10 to join your mission, it would be really hard to convince consumers to purchase your product. So each time, you reach those steps, you convince your friends and family to invest. You convince a friend who's working in a great company to join your mission. You convince a great advisors to come join your mission. All those steps demonstrates to an investor that, hey, he's onto something. He might be able to actually sell his product to consumers. So yeah.
That's great advice. And so were you relentless in that mission as well? So you talked about in your Medium article, which our team will put a link to the chat and everybody should read it. It's awesome. It's got some great advice in there. In there, you talked about how wonderful your team at Grow Credit is, and how serendipity brought you together. But how did you go about convincing them to jump onto the Grow Credit team? I know a lot of founders I speak with, they're at the earliest stages, they can't pay people, they're not at that point yet, and they're trying to get a founding team together. What do those conversations look like? And do you have any advice for founders who are in that same spot right now?
So in my case, we are a tech business. We are a fintech company. So I needed a tech team and I needed an affordable tech team. And I was fortunate enough that, I worked with a gentleman named Sam Ribas, who was living in Portugal. And we worked together on a project when I was still involved in the gaming world. We developed a game studio together, and at the same time that I was launching Lenny Credit, which was precursor of Grow Credit, he was also leaving his company, which was called Miniclip. So we had that relationship. We worked together in the past. He was in Portugal, and it was very cheap to hire him. And he had a great team in Portugal that he could put together to work with me. So, the fact that he lived in Portugal, the fact that we had a relationship before, a work relationship before, made it easy. And it's a case, he also saw me succeed in my previous company, which also made it easier for him to join our team. So in these cases, when you're a startup, you have to be scrappy, and you have to make sure that your burn rate is as low as possible. So I was able to really able to onboard a very professional team that cost me almost nothing. We're talking about almost nothing, and they stuck with me for 6 years. And the challenge of working with an outsourced team, of course, outsourced team, is distance. Working from distance. So we've been COVID-19. We've worked from distance for the past 6 years. We worked with Zoom, and it's very, very difficult to maintain trust over a long period of time. So if you're talking about the sacrifices, yeah, they're cheap, but they live far away. It's hard to maintain the trust. This is when culture becomes essential, to really keeping the team together and maintain a low burn rate to enable us to, survive in the long run. Because the longer you survive, the easier it will be, to find a business to achieve product market fit, essentially.
Absolutely. And so you talked a little bit there about your burn rate and how, you intentionally were trying to maximize all the early investments you got, everything that went into Grow Credit very early on, to give you more time to reach milestones with every dollar. What went into making those decision-making processes? I know some of those were tough decisions, but really trying to extend your burn rate. How did you go about doing that and making those decisions with your founding team?
So, some of the decisions involved actually hiring more junior employees and having to coach them up. And the only way to be able to keep the company going at a low burn rate is for the founder. It was for me to really act as a coach for my team, and that's extremely challenging. Some employees didn't have the maturity level for their position necessarily. They had to grow into it. So it was a lot of my time that was involved into making sure that they would be at their best at their work. A lot of coaching, a lot of teaching, a lot of supporting. So becoming essentially a servant leader has been critical, to helping us last while maintaining a low burn rate.
Yeah, and can I ask you to elaborate on that a little bit, and just in the sense of what what resources or things did you use to help learn how to be that type of leader, a coach, and what are some things you lean on pretty regularly to make that happen and to keep your team growing over time?
Okay, so well, I read enormously. I read a ton. So if you go to on the Medium post, about my experience as an entrepreneur, I have a list of about maybe 10 or 20 links, that have been instrumental in helping us, sustain ourselves for an extended period of time. The key really, is really a case of maintaining a positive mindset to avoid a turnover within the company. So my focus is really on we create a system in a company to ensure that the culture stays the same, stays intact, that we can weather the storm on a regular basis. And that system involved first at a personal level, having a journal, a daily journal, where I write down my daily wins. It's very important from a mental standpoint. This is really a lot of a mental game. How do you remain mentally aware, and not negative, always positive? And the way to do this is by writing down every single day your daily wins all the time. So that process was extended to the team itself, in the sense that we have a structure in the company where on every Friday, we have every department sends me their reports. When the department sends me the reports, I create a Friday report, that focuses on what we did well, but also that focuses on what we didn't do well. That's very important. Those are highlighted to any advisors, founders out there. Drafting a report on a weekly basis will help you maintain a positive momentum consistently. I mean, I gave the example of my reports on the article online. It is a crucial exercise that really keeps everyone focused in the same direction. It sets the tone for the team in terms of what is expected from everyone. It creates accountability for everyone. It's hard to cheat when you have a system where every week everyone demonstrate what they did, what they achieved, and all. And it's been essential. And most importantly, focusing on being extremely transparent. That's something that I really, I really pushed hard, on our team to demonstrate that whatever we do wrong, every faults that we have to expose them publicly. And what I mean by publicly, we are sharing, our Friday report with our investors, with our advisors, and some of our core bank partners. And exposing our flaws is actually liberating because it forces us to fix those flaws the very next week. So transparency is an essential, critical component in terms of maintaining a positive mindset, a positive momentum for the company on a regular basis. In terms of the culture that we have, it's really a culture around a structure. We have like 4 emails that is drafted on a weekly basis. Again, the Friday report email, the Monday note, which details what we all need to achieve during the week, the positivity report, which is an email that is drafted on a Tuesday, that every department sends me a few things that they did well on Monday and Tuesday, and that we only focus on the positive, and we also have the mindfulness notes, that really are an emails that I draft to share, certain traits that we need to embrace as a team in order to maintain, our positive momentum. So it's a lot of communication. I have to communicate on a regular basis. The communication are done at a set time. So basically it creates a structure. It creates a system where the company has a life of its own. Everyone knows that on Tuesday we have to do this, on Friday we have to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So that creates a structure. But all around it, it's very important to remain flexible with that structure. So this is where I really encourage all our teams can meet at any time they want. There's a lot of fluidity within the system. So within the way we operate with each other, the meetings are at any times are random. So from a culture standpoint, we are really emphasizing, again, having a core structure, but a lot of flexibility, around the structure where teams, departments can meet however they want. And that really has helped us, maintain our positive momentum, week in and week out.
I love that. I love all that structure too, because I think that probably has played a really big role in maintaining a virtual team culture, right? Which I know so many people are struggling with right now because they're doing it for the first time. And sort of having these positive updates and these accountability check-ins seem to be playing a huge role. And I wanted to ask too, you mentioned you send a weekly update, or you get the weekly updates, and I believe you send them monthly to your investors, if not maybe more frequently. How did that play a role in your seed round? Because I know not enough founders send those out, and they're pretty big deals. So can you share a little bit about that?
Exactly. So because we have those weekly reports, it enables us to seamlessly send those reports to our potential investors, on a monthly basis. Maintaining that relationship, with investors is crucial. You meet with them for the first time. It's a dating game. No one's going to invest with you when you meet them. It's just not going to happen. They need to be able to get a sense of who you are. It's a relationship building exercise, and sharing those reports once a month with investors enables them to really see how you progress, how your team is growing. They will be able to see how your KPIs are progressing. And by the way, talking about KPIs, focusing on the data, every investors love to see data. They want to see that investors, founders are focused on data. In our case, we have to worry about what's our conversion rate, our delinquency rate, what's our retention rate, and focusing on those core KPIs and demonstrating to investors that we are data focused is very, very important. So we are, once a month, we are sharing, our progress report, with investors. And then once we get closer to actually closing around, we are actually increasing the rate. Instead of just going from once every month, we actually go to weekly, just to let them know how, hey, we're about to raise. We want to see exactly what's happening on a weekly basis to really have that relationship become even closer, so that they really get a sense of the feel of how the company is really operating. And so communication. Again, no investors is going to be really rare for anyone to give you money immediately, very rare. And every time that you see an investor who received 10 term sheets, it is an illusion. They did a lot of work for those 10 term sheet to happen. They did a lot of preparation, for this 10 sheet to happen. They did a lot of communication, a lot of talking and all for this to happen. And as an entrepreneur, once you switch from being an operator to fundraising, you have to stop operating completely. And that's the single most important advice that I'm going to give you here. Once it's time to fundraise, you have to drop everything that you do, everything, and just focus on fundraising. Because fundraising is hard. You're going to get a lot of no's, a lot of rejections. You have to prepare a lot of documents. You need to know your data by heart. If you don't know your data, because you're going to get grilled with your data. And if you're not on point with your data, investors will pass on you. So once you reach that stage where it's time to fundraise, nothing else. Even if your growth it goes down, it doesn't matter. It should become a primary job that could last 2 to 3 months. It doesn't matter. So and keep in mind, and one of the reasons why you have to switch from being an operator and focus on being solely a fundraiser is because the energy that you bring on an investor meeting is completely different from the energy that you have as an operator. By the way, I've been guilty of this. I'm a sprinter, I move fast, I execute. So I have a lot of aggressive energy to keep everything moving at the same time, but you cannot bring that aggressive energy or that getting things done energy into a meeting with investors. Investors, it's a dating game. You have to be calm. You have to be poised. You have to be, willing to play the long game and getting to know the person. And most importantly, that investor will be part of your life, the history of your company for the next 10 years. So you have to make sure that you are not only, the key is just not only looking for funding, but you also have to look for an investor who will be here to support you throughout the entire cycle of the company. So building that relationship, taking the time to build that relationship is extremely important. And you cannot force time. You cannot force a relationship. It takes time. And that is the hardest thing. That's been incredibly hard for me because I execute. That's what I do. And switching from executing to fundraising, it's like you're riding a rocket ship and you have to just turn off the engine and go. And it's been always very challenging. It usually takes me 2 to 3 weeks to go back into the fundraising mode. It's not an easy process for me. Some people do it really well. It's just not an easy process for me. But once you get into the groove of fundraising, then it becomes easy. You know your data by heart. You know how to pitch your story very easily, and you learn how to take the no's, much easier as well, because you will get tons of no's. Your ego will get bruised. But the more you get no's, the less you care, the more resilient you become. And because at the end of the day, what's very important to understand is investors sometimes, it's not that they don't like you. Sometimes it's not even, sometimes you may have a great business model, but sometimes they are, you have to, VCs are also startups to a certain extent, and they need to meet specific criteria in order to make the investments. So if you are too late for them, they cannot invest because they need to own at least X% of your company. If you're too early first, if your growth is not, if you are not growing at a fast enough rate, same thing, that they cannot invest. If you don't have a certain amount of revenue, because they have revenue requirement, you need to generate, let's say, $500,000 in ARR, in annual recurring revenue. If you're not there, even if they like you, they might not be able to invest in you. So there's a lot of reason why you receive the no, and sometimes investors don't really tell the full story. It's because it's hard to, it's hard for them to say no all the time, but it's just hard to give the full explanation on why they cannot move in. And that's why it's very important not to take it personally to a certain extent, or in my case, I took it personally, but it worked in my advantage. You have in a sense that I'm an athlete. I was an athlete. So if you tell me no, for me, it's like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So you have the two, methods or train of thoughts. In my case, as an athlete, each no, it makes me stronger, because I'm going to come back with the numbers that you want and more. So, and the idea that even being a minority, being Black, being a woman, and it's, for me, I take it as an advantage, because the stats are against me. I only have 1% of 1% chances, of obtaining receiving some funding from an institutional investor. Only 1%. So in my case, I had to prove people wrong. I had to demonstrate that you tell me no, I'm going to come back with your numbers and more. It is the idea that, pressure creates diamond. When you have a lot of pressure and you don't give up, what it does, it allows you to really just enhance your capability. If you're not a good speaker, well, you're going to force yourself to become a good speaker. If you're not good with numbers, well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be good, at understanding my KPI. It's really using the challenge, the no's, as an opportunity to get better. And that actually, if you don't give up, and most importantly, if founders love, their mission so much that they're willing to give up anything, so you are in until the end, well, you will find ways. You become resourceful. You will find enough resourceful strength within you, to get to get your yes at the end of the day. And most of the time, not getting the funding early, being scrappy, will enable you to develop a product that's very unique, that's very advanced. And sometimes having a lot of funding actually can be counterproductive, because it makes you lazy. So if you are able to embrace that the struggle makes you better as a founder, if you understand that, embrace the stress, embrace challenges. Actually, there's an article, I really highly recommend watching this TED video called Make Stress Your Friend. Just type stress and friends, and it's an amazing TED video that teaches about how to really transform stress into a positive energy. So, if you take all those steps, transforming negativity or transforming challenges into a positive, it's an amazing trait, to become a successful at fundraising, in my opinion. And lastly, confidence. You cannot fake confidence, and confidence comes from hard work. If you work extremely hard and you did your work, you'll be able to come into the meetings very confident into the meetings. And when you, it's very important to go fundraising when you're also very confident with your data, when you KPIs. And by the way, regardless of where if you have enough money in your bank account, if you have a lot, confidence is the greatest asset that you have, once you are once you start beginning the process of fundraising. Trying to fundraise when you don't have any cash in your bank account is terrible, because any investors will feel it, they will sense it, and this could have really, and they would sense that you're scared, and no one wants to invest in someone that's scared. So confidence, again, you build that confidence by working extremely hard, and by making sure that each time it's time for you to fundraise, something good happen in the company, that gives you enough strength, to enter those, those conversations around fundraising.
Sounds like all of the resiliency work that you're doing as a person on your own is really playing into your ability to be able to keep going as a founder and to keep your business going and to stay focused and to hear the no's and just, let them, okay, no problem, on to the next, and I'm gonna prove you wrong. Would you agree that that's the case?
Exactly. And working out, it's a mental game. It's all in the head. We know. So I'm committed to, last year I averaged 6 miles a day, the entire year last year. Walking it's extremely good to, because as a founder, we have to wear different hats. We all know that. But in order to shift from one hat to another, committing to walks, I do it in the evening. Some people do it in the morning. It really helps reset the body, resets the mind, which enables you to, on one day, you're chief marketing officer, but then the next day, you're the chief finance officer. But that walks enables you to do that transition more seamlessly. Otherwise, you get a case of context switching. That's something that happens to developers, to programmers a lot. When they have to switch from programming one thing to another, the brain takes a little bit of time to switch from another. That walking, that commitment to walking or exercising, really enables me, enables other founders to really switch from one aspect of a business to another more seamlessly. So and there's an article online, and I think it's one of I posted it on the article about that demonstrate that showcase that all the greatest inventors all the way back to Socrates, they all walked. Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, all of Einstein, they were all committed to walking, because actually it has a meditative aspect to it, which really help settles your mind and actually helps you become more creative at the same time.
That's great advice to make sure to keep moving. I think Eric in the chat said strong body, strong mind, which we 100% agree with. So that is wonderful advice. One other question I had for you is that both of your startups, this is kind of related to resilience a little bit, both of the startups we've talked about experienced strategic pivots. So how did you know when it was time to pivot your company? And do you have any advice for founders who may be going through that process or might go through it in the near future?
Yes, this is a case of really being honest with yourself and being some really self-assessment. And it's good to be a fighter, but sometimes you have to be able to stop, pause, and realize that you cannot fight. There's no way out. In my case, for instance, should I tell the story about Lenny Bike? A little bit. Yeah, so it's a great story. That's how we ended up with Grow Credit, actually. In 2015, I started Lenny Credit, as a way, which was the first platform to help consumers establish or build credit. We were offering microloans of $100 and up to $500 to consumers, and we did a partnership with FICO to also offer a free FICO score and credit score education. So, I went all in. I had no experience in lending or banking, and I said, there's a problem to fix, and I think I can do it. And it was all based on the personal experience. I came here to the United States in '97. I didn't know anything about the credit score or credit cards, and I was offered a credit card by a bank back then, and I was late here and there. And being late actually had a negative impact on the credit score. And it took me 4 or 5 years to rebuild my credit. It was just a pretty nightmare situation. So back in 2015, I started Lenny Credit. And for the past 2 years, with no banking or lending experience. And we launched in 2016, and the platform was doing okay, but we needed debt financing, basically a bank partner to grow our business. The problem was we were the first, which is good and bad. Banks had no idea what we were doing. We were using a platform called Plaid, which was very novel back then. And basically, we couldn't raise. We couldn't raise, and without debt financing, the business was going down. At the last minute, it was in December, in June of 2017, a Chinese fund reached out of the blue and asked me to come meet with them in San Francisco. So I met with them, I pitched them Lenny Credit, and after 30 minutes, they told me, you know what? We don't want you to do Lenny Credit. We want you to launch a bike share program. I was like, what's a bike share program? It said, listen, it's huge in China. We're going to be able to give you, we have a Chinese manufacturer that will give you the bikes, and we just want you to set up the infrastructure in the United States, and we'll give you $1.2 million to launch a program. I was like, what's a bike share program? This was completely out of the blue. But what I did, I went home, thought about it, and I decided to stick with the vision, which was helping consumers establish or build credit seamlessly, and adjust the tactics. So I ended up creating a bike share program subscription that will also help consumers establish or build credit. And I called it Lenny Bike. The investors love it. They gave me the funding to build it. And we were scheduled to launch it in June of 2018. And guess what happened? Bird raised $300 million. And then Lime Bike raised $330 million. And guess what? I only had $600,000 in the bank and I couldn't compete. So I had no choice but to shut down the business. And keep in mind that the investors were supposed to give me another $600,000 to launch. And I told them, we cannot compete. We had to move, to change, to do something else. So what happened was, again, in a complete luck, I just realized that we used a subscription-based model to help consumers establish or build credit. And this is when I realized that there was Netflix, Netflix, Spotify, and tons of subscriptions that we could use to help consumers establish or build credit. And I was fortunate that Peter Mansfield, a gentleman that was a founding member at Marqeta, was able to put me in contact with that team. And over the following 6 months, we essentially, worked together to create Grow Credit, which is the first credit card that it helps consumers establish credit for free using their subscription payments. Again, it was a case where I was stuck. I completely stuck, and I had to find a creative way out of it because I couldn't compete with the other the bike share program, and that led us to Grow Credit. So again, we stuck with the vision, just adjusted the tactics twice, one with the bike and then with the subscription models.
And again, never gave up, right?
Never give up. Never give up.
That's, yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, and sharing that sort of major pivot. I guess not major, but strategic pivot that you made from Lenny to Lenny Bike to Grow Credit. So I'd love to get into a few questions from the audience really quickly. And so here we go. Let's talk a little bit about, let's go back to the reports that you send out. So Erica said, what kind of information would be the most valuable in the reports you were referencing? You mentioned quite a few data points there, but what do you think really moves the needle in terms of sending reports, both to investors and the ones that you use internally?
So, to investors, the KPI is just once your project is launched, demonstrating the growth on a week-to-week basis is very important. How many new specifically paying customers, if you have, how many new paying customers you've gained on a week-to-week basis. So it really depends on business to business. In our case, again, we have 4 KPIs that we need to demonstrate, we need to showcase to investors. We have, again, our conversion rate to premium plans. Our churn data. Churn is a very important data, to capture. And investors wants to know once you churn, meaning they want to see your ability. How good are you at retaining your customers? If you have a first month churn below 4%, it's actually really good data. It means you're able to retain a vast majority of your users over an extended period of time. The payback period is also a crucial data, that investors want to see. And payback period means how long does it take for you to recover your investment to acquire users? How quickly do you get that money back? Anything under 4 months is excellent. 5-6 months is okay. 4 months is excellent. So that's the type of data that I make sure to share, on a weekly basis, with our team and our investors. But again, the challenge section, what you need to understand is there's no company in the world that's just working perfectly. It doesn't work. If you share a rosy picture of your company every single week, no one will trust you because it doesn't work that way. You build trust by sharing your win and your losses. If you are able to, if the worst thing happened and you are able to share it in the challenge section of your report, like, hey, we lost X amount of users or XYZ happened, guess what happened? Investors trust you. Investors know that he's going to share everything with us. He's not going to hide everything. And you know what happened when that trust is built? Well, last year when COVID-19 hit, in March, we were out of cash. We need to raise around, and we're able to raise $500,000 from our current investors just because they could trust us, because we were sending those reports on a weekly basis. They knew us. They knew that they could count on us to be truthful and honest. But then when it was time for us to count on our investors, they were here for us. And the report helped that transparency that we had saved us when we needed it the most. So having the challenge section on a weekly basis is crucial, and it will help you tremendously, to raise funding from external and internal investors.
Wow, that's super powerful and a really great example of when that trust is needed, right? Wonderful. So Karamoko asks, who can run the business when the founder is looking to raise money? So basically, when you move into that fundraising mindset, I have a feeling it may be systems may be part of this answer, but who is running the business and how are you able to do that?
Well, fortunately, that, as I mentioned, because you have a system in place that, that's auto-discipline itself, I can literally be out and not worry about it, and the company will run on its own. That's why building those recurring emails and structure is very helpful when you move away from the company. And because the team is, they're responsible. They are what's the term again? They're self-disciplined. The trust is in place. Yes, at some point you have to. That's why you have to create a system that you can trust and believe, so that you can move away and just focus on fundraising. Having a co-founder is also very important. This is when having a co-founder is crucial. Because they can go ahead and run the company while you're doing the fundraising on your own. And that's why investors love teams with at least two co-founders, because they know that fundraising is hard, and having someone who can keep the house intact while the other founder is raising, they look for it. So being a solo investor, solo founder is tough, because you don't have that capability to leave the company alone and just focus on fundraising. So finding a good co-founder is important from the onset.
Absolutely. And you have a ton of trust in your team because you've been coaching them the whole time, kind of getting back to our early conversation, right? You've been grooming them and keeping them very up to date with everything that's going on with the company. So any person can answer any question and handle anything, right?
The trust is there, trust with the investors, but trust with my team, because they know I just tell them the truth. And because we have that bond, they keep the company together, because I have their back and they have my back at the same time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. So Andres asks, when do you think is the right time to get funding, or when is the moment to stop looking for investment, if there is any? So you mentioned about a 2 to 3 month period. I know some founders, it's taken up to 9 months to get a seed round. Is there a stopping point, or when is and if there isn't, when is the right time to get started as a founder?
So in terms of timing, you very important. You always want to have at least 5 months of burn rate of runway in your bank account. You cannot start raising if you have a month of cash in the bank account, 2 months, even 3 months. You put stress on yourself, and if you put stress on yourself, investors will see that you're stressed out. It will make it very difficult for you to complete your fundraising. So ideally, you want to start the fundraising literally 6-7 months before you run out of cash. Very, very important. And also, you want to actually raise, regardless of the situation, even if you have your financial security, is the idea you ask money when you don't need money. So if things are going well in the company and you have some really good KPIs, go fundraise, because you're going to be able to fundraise with that confidence, as well. So did I answer the question? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's great. And hopefully Andres found that helpful as well. Okay, and then Johnny asks, what's something you wish you had known before you started your first company?
Um, what? Uh, I wish uh, I didn't know how important building relationship was. You know, and maybe because of the fact that I did track, it was an individual sport where it was only me, myself, and I. I just didn't care much. Building relationship, you know, networking is crucial, and not networking at the last minute. Networking all the time, ahead of time, maintaining those relationships. It took me. I just didn't know about it. It took me years to figure that one out. If I had known, from the onset that, hey, you have to, talk to investors, maintain the relationship with investors, email investors, and all that stuff, it would have made my life a lot easier. So being focused on, building those ties is something that I wish I'd known from the onset.
Yes, we tell founders that all the time too. You need to build your network. By the time you need it, it's too late. You needed to build it sooner. And so start today if you haven't, and keep growing it from there. And Johnny actually asked another question, which I think is pretty relevant too. What was your approach to equity split? And I saw another question come around about how you found your co-founder. So can you elaborate on those two things really quick?
Okay, finding the co-founder, again, it's tough. You have to network. It's networking, it's friends. It's someone you work with in the past. Keep in mind that investors, the number one question that VCs will ask you is, how long have you known your co-founder? Because the number one reason for companies to implode is because of the lack of trust with founders. So the longer you've known your founder, the likelihood for your company to succeed is just much longer. So, working with someone who you've had a relationship with, or you've been through challenges together, or you worked together in the past, is actually a major positive selling point. In terms of equity split, it's complicated. It really depends. It's all about who's bringing what, who's coming up with the idea, who's bringing the money. Because if I'm in the business, for instance, I invested, I invested all my $2.6 million, almost all of the cash I've ever had over the past 6 years. And that's why I was able to retain the vast majority of the company, because I put all the money in. So if you bring the money plus the idea and you create the idea, you have a greater share of the company. If you have a technical founder who has a lot of experience coming from a major company, yeah, you should get a good sizable amount of the company as well. It's most importantly, you have to make sure that your co-founder is happy with their equity stake, because if they're not happy with their equity stakes, they're not going to bleed for the company. So you cannot cheapen your co-founder.
Yeah, and those relationships are super important, as you just said. That's a great insight that investors also ask, how long have you known your co-founder? Because I haven't heard that before, but that does make a lot of sense. That's a data point for them to gather for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Harish asks, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anyone's name. I promise I'll try my best. But Harish asks, how has your work-life balance changed over time, from before you started the company to getting it off the ground and after raising investments?
Well, this is when I have a very unbalanced life because I wanted to succeed at all cost. I don't have a life. I have a cat. So that's it. What we're doing is so complicated. I mean, so not only I have to raise equity financing, but I have to raise debt financing at the same time. And I'm the product guy in the company, and I have to manage, the CFO type of role at the same time. It's impossible for me to have a regular life and be successful. It doesn't work. In our case, especially in our case, it just doesn't work. So, Elon Musk said not too long ago that you're not going to change the world by working 40 hours a week. You're not going to change the world. So in order to really succeed, I think at the highest level, well, you have to put in the work and just be fully, completely dedicated to this. But then having a support system is massively important. The reason I'm doing well is just I have tons of friends. I have an enormous amount I have 12 advisors and I use them all. So I can, when I'm stressed, I can always call a friend, call an advisor, and I have friends that are just there to listen. They just listen. Others there to give me some feedback. So, just in terms of mental health, just like working out is very important, having a support system, to help you during that tough journey is also massively important. But yeah, it's a commitment. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And you wrote about that in your article too. One of the quotes I pulled was, the question you want to ask yourself first is, are you willing to risk everything to succeed? So in times when it's tough, in times when things happen like COVID and other things pop up and they're challenging all the resiliency that you've built, how do you stay just relentlessly after your goal? Do you have some advice for that?
It's all about love. At the end of the day, it's all about love. And if you build something, that's really not for your own personal gain, but if you build a company that's of service, that's to help others, it's not work anymore. Because you're doing something that's my what makes me feel alive, what makes me go back to work with the same enthusiasm every day, because I know that I'm helping people out there, because I know that we're making a difference every single day. And that is my fuel, essentially. So when you do something that's just not, self-driven, that's really, you act out of service, that makes it very easy to just go all the time. And that makes it easy to also risk it all. Because helping people is what makes me happy. And risking it all doesn't do it. I mean, it's easy for me because that's what makes me feel alive. So being of service is the key. Developing platform that truly helps others, makes the fundraising and startup building process so much easier.
Yeah, having a strong mission, a strong why, that becomes your North Star over time, right? And helps you maintain. So wonderful advice. All right, we're at time. So any final closing tips for founders at this time? And I'll add to that, anything that you suggest people read, because you're such an avid reader and you're taking in so much information. So anything you want to close out with today?
Yes, essentially, we should Essentialism. A great book that really teaches you about being very concise with everything. Just great book. Relentless by the coach Michael Jordan, strength and conditioning coach. Team. I forgot his last name, but the name of the book is Relentless. I highly recommend this book. And we talked about it earlier, Rachel. 12 Rings. By Phil Jackson, which is a great book. That really explains the duality of life in general, with the importance of having a structure and having flexibility at the same time. So yeah, those are 3 books that I highly recommend to read, that have helped me throughout my entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. I think both of us have drawn off of inspirations from athletes' mindsets and things that help us revisit, just general fortitude, resiliency, and strong mindset. So Joe, you've been wonderful. This has been just a myriad of advice for founders. I hope everyone got some wonderful takeaways from today. I know I did. I know I have a reading list now. So thank you so much for your time. Everyone will get a copy of this webinar in their email in the next few days. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Joe.
Bye.